The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, and callers on this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the producers or any affiliated entities. Listener discretion is advised.
Time Capsule Tunes presents ultChronicles, where we take a deep dive beyond the beats. With your hosts, Cassandra Ryder, Jasper Knight, and Mark Hamilton.
What is the 27 Club? The 27 Club refers to a group of influential musicians and artists who tragically died at the age of 27. This phenomenon has intrigued and haunted fans for decades, as the list of members includes iconic figures such as Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Amy Winehouse. In this episode, we delve into the eerie pattern and its impact on the music world and beyond.
Ever heard of the 27 Club? You know, all those musicians who died at 27.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild phenomenon when you think about it.
It stuck around for decades, right? I bet people are pretty curious about it.
Definitely. It's got that, tragic mystery to it. Talented people dying young.
We've got a ton of stuff to look at today. Articles, research, even some cultural analysis. Should be fascinating. So is the 27 Club a real thing? Or just one of those tragic coincidences that took on a life of its own?
Well, that's what we're here to figure out. It's interesting, though, how this whole club idea, which we'll get into later, has really captured the imagination.
For sure. It's a mix of things, right? The whole talent gone too soon thing, the dark side of fame, maybe even a bit of superstition thrown in.
Totally. It's definitely more than just like a statistic on a page. The 27 Club has some serious cultural weight to it.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit. Where did this whole 27 Club thing even begin?
Well, you got to go back to the late 60s. Rock and roll was huge, but a lot of artists were living pretty hard lives.
Right on the edge.
Exactly. Brian Jones, founding member of the Rolling Stones, died in '69. Multi-instrumentalist, but struggled with substance abuse.
Yeah, his death was definitely a tragedy.
It kind of set the stage for what was to come,
And then in 1970...
Boom. We lose two more icons.
Jimi Hendrix?
Hendrix, the guitar god himself, changed rock music forever, and Janis Joplin.
Her voice was just incredible, so raw and powerful.
Both battling addiction, sadly. Just a year later, Jim Morrison, the frontman of The Doors, gone too.
So within, 3 years? We lose 4 huge stars, all at the age of 27. I can see why people start to see a pattern there.
It's eerie, right? Almost like a curse or something. But here's the thing. It wasn't until Kurt Cobain in '94 that the 27 Club went mainstream.
That's true. Why do you think that is?
Well, the world was changing. Internet was blowing up. Celebrity news was everywhere. Cobain's death hit a lot of people hard. Plus, there's that quote from his mom.
Oh, right. She said, now he's gone and joined that stupid club. I told him not to join that stupid club.
Exactly. Powerful words, especially coming from a grieving mother. Really cemented the idea of a club in people's minds. So where do we go from here? Well, we could talk about Jimi Hendrix. Oh, man. Hendrix is something else. The way he played, the sounds he got out of that guitar, his influence on rock music, huge, just massive.
And Hendrix wasn't the only one making waves, right? Joplin, that raw energy, that voice, he really changed things up, too.
Oh, for sure. Joplin's performances, legendary. So much passion in every single note.
They both really pushed the boundaries, musically and culturally.
They weren't afraid to be themselves, even with all the struggles they faced.
It's really sad when you think about it. So much talent gone way too soon. It makes you wonder about the pressure they were under, to keep creating, to keep pushing the boundaries, and all while dealing with the craziness of fame.
No doubt about it. It's a tough world, and not everyone's cut out for it, It's a shame, really.
And then, of course, there's Jim Morrison. Poet, musician, rock star. The Doors had that dark, mysterious vibe. That was all Morrison.
Totally. He had this presence on stage, so captivating. But yeah, his demons were no secret, right? The addiction, the internal struggles.
It's a recurring theme, isn't it? This incredible talent mixed with this feeling of, living on the edge.
Yeah. It's like they were burning twice as bright,
But burning out too fast.
Exactly. And then you've got Kurt Cobain. He was the voice of a generation for a reason.
He really tapped into something with Nirvana, that feeling of angst, of not fitting in. It was huge in the 90s.
Yeah. And his death, much like the others, it sparked a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
About fame, about the music industry, about mental health.
It felt like a wake-up call for a lot of people, a reminder that success doesn't always equal happiness.
Well, then you have Amy Winehouse in 2011. Her death, also at 27, it kind of brought the whole 27 Club thing back into the spotlight. But her struggles were very public.
So we've got all these stories, all these cultural connections, but is there actually any science behind it? Is there really a spike in deaths at age 27?
Okay, so here's where things get really interesting. The short answer, no. No magic curse on the number 27.
What does the data actually tell us then about the real risks for musicians, I mean?
Well, there was this study, right, published in the British Medical Journal back in 2011. They looked at thousands of musicians, tons of data, and guess what? No increased risk at 27.
So it is just a coincidence.
Pretty much. They even found equally small increases at ages 25 and 32.
So if it's not statistically significant, how come the 27 Club is still such a big deal? Why are we still talking about it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think it's because, well, it's about more than just numbers. It's about how we deal with loss, especially when it comes to artists, to people who create things.
It's like the 27 Club is more about us, more about how we react to these tragedies than about the musicians themselves.
Yeah, for sure. It's about how we process these losses. We tend to romanticize these figures, right? These young artists who die at the peak of their careers.
It's like we focus on all the what-ifs, all the things they could have done.
Exactly. We try to find meaning in the tragedy like there's some big cosmic reason for it all.
But even if the 27 Club isn't really, real, it's still everywhere you look.
Oh, totally. Movies, books, music, there's a whole cultural obsession with it.
It reminds us that success isn't everything. And that fame can be a double-edged sword.
It's a heavy crown to wear, that's for sure. The 27 Club is a compelling story, but we need to talk about the real issues. Mental health, addiction, the weight of expectations.
We need to support artists as people, not just for the art they create.
Yes. 1,000 times yes. Listen to them, offer help, and ditch the judgment.
All podcasts from Time Capsule Tunes and Vault Chronicles are rated E for everyone.
You are listening to Vault Chronicles. We go beyond the surface, offering richer understanding and fresh perspectives on the music topics you love. Each month, our hosts engage in thoughtful dialogue, revealing the stories, significance, and nuances behind the featured music. Together with Time Capsule Tunes, we bring you 4 episodes a month, packed with engaging content and meaningful analysis. Don't miss an episode, follow us and join our musical journey.
The concept of the 27 Club first gained notoriety in the early 1970s following the deaths of several high-profile musicians. Over time, it has become shrouded in myth and speculation, with some viewing it as a cosmic coincidence and others as a curse. We'll explore the origins of the club, the myths that surround it, and the stark realities faced by these artists.
It's enough to make you wonder if there's some kind of curse on young talent. That's the myth of the 27 Club and why it still holds so much power over us.
Human need to find patterns in seemingly random events.
Right, like some tragic coincidence.
Yeah.
But we're all about separating fact from fiction here.
Absolutely. And the facts in this case are quite telling. Research, including a 2011 study published in the British Medical Journal, has actually debunked the existence of a statistically significant spike in musician deaths at 27.
Wait, really? So it's all just a myth? But there are so many famous examples.
That's the thing about myths. They often have a kernel of truth that makes them stick. While the 27 Club isn't statistically validated, it's true that young musicians, particularly those who become famous, face a higher mortality rate overall compared to their non-famous peers.
Okay, so the curse might be more about the lifestyle than some mystical number.
Precisely. Interestingly, one analysis even suggested that musicians might actually be more likely to die at age 56.
56. Okay, now that is a random number. What's the story there?
There's no definitive answer yet, but some researchers speculate it might be related to the long-term effects of the rock and roll lifestyle or the pressures of a decades-long career in a notoriously fickle industry. This potential peak at 56, whether true or not, further challenges the idea that 27 is uniquely cursed.
Why does it still feel so real, so present in our minds when we think about music history?
It's because, ultimately, we connect with stories, not statistics.
Yeah.
The 27 Club resonates because it reflects some very real and very human experiences. When you think about the artists, it's not just the age that connects them, it's also the circumstances. Many of their stories are strikingly similar, even across different eras and genres.
Exactly. And by delving into a few of these stories, I think we can start to see those common threads emerge. the incredible highs of creative expression, but also the crushing lows, the pressures, and the temptations that often come with fame at a young age.
Let's take Jimi Hendrix, for example. When you hear him play, you're hearing a true innovator, someone who pushed the boundaries of music. But behind that incredible talent was a person who struggled with the dark side of fame.
Hendrix's story is a classic example of the double-edged sword of fame in the music industry. He achieved phenomenal success in a short period of time.
Right.
But that rapid ascent can be isolating and disorienting. Suddenly you're surrounded by an entourage, everyone wants a piece of you, and the pressure to keep producing hits is immense. It's a lot for anyone to handle, let alone someone so young. And it's not just the external pressures. You also have the internal pressures that many artists grapple with. The need to constantly create, the fear of losing their muse, and the emotional vulnerability that often fuels their art.
Absolutely. And this is where we often see those common threads of addiction and mental health struggles emerge. It's like the same intensity that allows these artists to channel such raw emotion into their music can also make them more susceptible to these very real and very painful experiences.
And sadly, the music industry hasn't always been the most supportive environment for dealing with those issues. In fact, it often feels like the opposite, a system that can exploit those vulnerabilities for profit.
That's a really important point. The music industry, particularly in decades past, often glamorized excess and risk-taking,
Yeah.
creating an environment where substance abuse was normalized, even encouraged.
It makes you wonder about the price of genius, you know? Like, is there something about that level of creativity that makes someone more susceptible to these kinds of struggles?
That's a question that's been debated for centuries. There's this idea of the tortured artist, but there's no simple answer.
It's complicated for sure. But maybe instead of trying to find one answer, maybe we should be asking different questions, like, what is it about the music industry that might contribute to these tragedies?
That's a really important point. The music industry is incredibly demanding. The pressure to produce, the constant touring, the media scrutiny, it takes a toll. And a lot of times these young artists are thrust into this world without any support systems.
Yeah, it's like a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
Yeah.
These are incredibly talented, often really sensitive people, and suddenly they're in the spotlight, surrounded by all these temptations. Expected to just cope, it's no wonder so many struggle.
Exactly. And it's why it's so important to talk about this stuff, to destigmatize mental health, to make sure these artists have access to support.
So it's not about glorifying the 27 Club, it's about learning from it, right?
Absolutely. It's about recognizing those warning signs, offering help, and creating a culture where vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's strength.
You're listening to Vault Chronicles, the companion podcast to Time Capsule Tunes. Join us each month as we take a deep dive into the music themes explored by the Time Capsule Tunes podcast, bringing you detailed discussions and unique insights in a dynamic two-person format.
All right, strap in because we're diving headfirst into a topic that's both tragic and fascinating. The 27 Club. You know, when Hendrix, Joplin, Cobain, all these incredible musicians gone too soon, forever frozen at 27. It seems like Kurt Cobain's death in '94 really cemented this concept in the public imagination. Was it just the timing or was there something more?
Timing is definitely a factor. But Cobain's death coincided with the rise of the 24/7 news cycle and the early days of the internet. Suddenly, information, especially celebrity news, was everywhere, spreading like wildfire. These deaths, decades apart, became intertwined in a way they never could have been before.
So it's like a perfect storm. These tragic deaths, our need to find meaning in chaos, and the rapid-fire nature of news and information. We're talking about real people, you know,
Absolutely.
with families and friends and dreams.
Right.
And the loss that's felt by those they left behind.
Yeah, it's important to remember that as catchy as the phrase 27 Club might be, each of these artists was an individual with their own unique story and their own struggles
Okay, sure.
and their own contributions to music.
For the sake of this deep dive,
Yeah.
can we maybe try to, like, I don't know, paint a picture
Sure.
for at least one of these artists to really get a sense of what it was like to walk in their shoes?
Okay.
Like, when I think of the 27 Club,
Yeah.
Janis Joplin immediately comes to mind.
Yeah, she's a great example, I think. Yeah.
Of the incredible talent, but also the vulnerability that just seems to be at the heart of this whole conversation.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, Joplin's voice
Oh my God.
was just, it was raw power
Yeah.
and emotion.
Yes.
But that same rawness, it was also reflected in her personal life.
It's like she couldn't separate the two, you know?
Yeah.
Like, she poured her entire being into her music, but it seemed to come at a real cost.
Yeah.
The loneliness, the addiction, this constant pressure to live up to this image.
And, the culture back then wasn't exactly known for being understanding about these things.
Right.
Mental health, it just wasn't talked about.
Yeah, it was a different time.
A lot of these artists were navigating the dark side of fame without a safety net.
Totally. It's like they were just expected to power through it all,
Yeah.
to keep churning out the hits no matter the personal cost,
Right.
which, as we're learning now, is just not sustainable.
Not at all.
And it's so sad because for every Janis Joplin, right?
There are probably countless others who didn't reach that level of fame,
Absolutely.
but who struggled with those same demons.
Right. Behind closed doors.
It makes you wonder, though,
That's
right?
that.
Like, if the support systems were better, if mental health wasn't so stigmatized back then, could some of these tragedies have been prevented?
It's hard to say for sure,
Yeah,
but it's definitely a question worth asking.
I think so.
And it's something that current and future musicians are thankfully addressing much more openly and honestly.
Okay, so there's hope.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not just this never-ending cycle.
Right. There's a growing awareness
Yeah.
that things need to change.
And I feel like there's some really incredible success stories out there
Oh, absolutely.
of artists who faced those same demons and came out stronger on the other side.
For sure.
Like, you think about Eric Clapton, Elton John, Demi Lovato, Steven Tyler. They've all been incredibly open about their struggles.
Yeah, they've all been through a lot.
Addiction, mental health, and how they found their own paths to recovery.
And what's really powerful is they didn't just recover in silence.
Exactly.
They turned their experiences into platforms for advocacy
Totally.
to help destigmatize these issues and inspire others who might be struggling.
Which I think is such a crucial part of this conversation.
Oh, 100%.
It's not enough to just acknowledge the problem.
Yeah.
We have to create an environment where people feel safe asking for help
Absolutely.
and sharing their stories without fear of judgment.
Well said.
And that's where the power of narrative comes in. We're naturally drawn to stories, especially stories of talent, fame, and untimely demise. They capture our imaginations and stay with us long after we've heard them.
But you always wonder what else they could have done if they had more time.
Absolutely. That's the question that stays with you, right?
Yeah.
What if? What if they would gotten the help they needed? What if the pressure, the lifestyle, hadn't been so overwhelming? It makes you think about the music industry itself. Is there something about it that makes artists, I don't know, more vulnerable?
Right. It's like, is it something in the water?
Yeah. And that's something researchers have been looking into for years, and it seems like there's no easy answer. Some
Yeah.
people point to the pressure to always be creating, to tour constantly, the access to, substances. Then there's the personality traits, the sensitivity, the intensity that a lot of artists have.
So it's not just one thing. It's a whole bunch of things that can create, a pretty dangerous situation.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that it's not all doom and gloom. For every artist we lose too young, there are others who face similar challenges and come out stronger on the other side.
That's true. You're right. It's not all like tragedy. There are stories of hope and people coming out of those dark places, right?
For sure.
So looking back on everything we've talked about, the 27 Club, the artists, the pressures they face, the hope for recovery, what's the main takeaway for you? What do you want our listeners to remember from all of this?
That's a great question. I think the biggest takeaway, and this is important, is that the 27 Club, while a super interesting part of our culture, is a reminder that life is fragile, that fame is complicated, and that mental health matters, like a lot. We need to talk about these things openly, with compassion, and support those who are struggling, whether they're artists or not.
Couldn't have said it better myself. The 27 Club, it's more than just a list of names. It makes us think about our own hopes, our fears, and those big questions about life and death and what it all means. Maybe, just maybe, if we keep talking about it, keep shining a light on the struggles and the triumphs, we can create a world where fewer artists feel like they have to go through it alone. And to everyone listening, we encourage you to explore the music of these artists, let their creativity move you, but also let their stories be a reminder to take care of yourselves and each other. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out for help. You don't have to go through this alone. There are people who care.
Couldn't agree more. There's always hope. Remember that.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the 27 Club. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep listening.
As we conclude our exploration of the 27 Club, we reflect on the lasting legacy of these remarkable artists. Their influence on music and culture remains undeniable, and their stories serve as a poignant reminder of the fragility of life. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the Vault Chronicles. Remember to keep the music alive and continue to celebrate the contributions of these extraordinary individuals. You've been listening to Vault Chronicles, a companion podcast to Time Capsule Tunes. We're here to enhance your musical journey with more in-depth discussions and fascinating stories. Subscribe, follow, share, and stay connected with us as we continue to explore the wonderful world of music. Until next time, take care and keep the music alive.